Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. Last week we talked about the entitlement of hardcore uber fans of franchises and how they alienate casuals and potential newcomers from fandoms or hobbies. This time, however, we're going to put the ringer to said casuals and newcomers because, believe it or not, they too can be entitled, without even trying to be either, and that also causes problems for those more invested in a hobby, franchise, setting, or series. Now for a detailed tier list of the various tiers, have a look at the previous video, which I'll link right here. But to summarize, fans can be tiered in numbers from tier 1 being non-fans just entering a work, to tier 6 hyper-fans who dedicate their lives to a very unhealthy degree. And we will be talking about fans in the previous videos tier 1 and tier 2, as well as a tier I didn't discuss, tier 0. Fandom haters. But we'll get into that when we get there. So to start with, you may be wondering how non-fans and casual fans can be entitled to begin with. After all, they're the ones with the least amount of connections to fandoms and franchises. Won't they also be capable of doing the least amount of damage? That would be true if the creators of works that these fandoms revolve around nowadays didn't focus on catering to these people almost exclusively in an attempt to turn them into a steady consumer base. Like with the problem of catering exclusively to the hardcores, catering to non-fans, casuals, and even anti-fans risks alienating the other groups, particularly the true fans. So it's the exact same kind of problem as we discussed before. So what are some examples of franchises that began catering to non-fans and casuals? Well, let's start with the Indian elephant in the room, Pokemon. Pokemon has been around since the 1990s, and its fan base is incredibly dedicated. A lot of fans, myself included, were there since the beginning and stuck around until a point where they started to cater to casuals and non-fans. At which point was that? After the creation of Pokemon Go, of course, America's favorite spyware. After Go, a huge influx of fans returned to the series or came to it for the first time, which gave the Pokemon brand a huge shot in the arm they haven't seen since Generation 1's Pokemania. To the point that Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are the best-selling spin-off games that catered specifically to Pokemon Go fans. And it goes beyond that when Pokemon Sword and Shield, the first mainline games on a full Nintendo console hardware with a full $60 price tag to boot, also sold over 20 million copies. The first mainline entries that surpassed that 20 million mark since Red and Blue. And we all know that Pokemon Sword and Shield as games were stripped down experiences designed to both be easier for Game Freak to make and also extremely simple for newcomers to get into, but are also actively hostile to older fans and veterans with things like removing features, moves, and the Dexit controversy, all of which I did a video on. This would sadly carry over into Scarlet and Violet, which, while it did promise a few things to bring back the older fans like non-linear storytelling, and were also, to their credit, at least better games after patches than Sword and Shield, were still rather stripped down, dumbed down, and soulless experiences focusing more on the Pokemon Go fans rather than the series veterans, with the addition of Go-esque mechanics like grinding kills for loot to create new moves. To make this very long story short, Game Freak received a big influx of new fans thanks to partnering with Niantic, but they sold their soul in order to keep that influx and make more money. Another series that traded its old fans to chase after new fans is Star Wars. After Disney purchased the brand from George Lucas, they decided to relegate the old expanded universe to its own continuity now known as Legends. The reason they did this was simple. It would make creating the sequels for the original 6 Star Wars movies easier if there was less expanded lore to work around. That, and they didn't want to pay royalties, but that's not relevant to this conversation. After all, they could just adapt the old books and comics, but why do that when it'd be far easier and a fair bit cheaper to write new stories? In fact, let's hire the guy who did those Star Trek reboot movies that everyone said were terrible as Star Trek movies and felt more in line with Star Wars, and the guy who did Knives Out, who was just itching to destroy a popular franchise because his mother didn't love him. Yeah, you can see how this ended up pleasing nobody. Unlike with Pokemon Go, the new Star Wars content didn't really have fans and didn't do any long-term financial benefits to the franchise. In fact, a lot of the support the sequels in High Republic did have ended up being outed as paid shills paid by Disney to AstroTurf the brand, and it ended with High Republic being cancelled as a publication error. While many franchises will try to greedily chase after a, quote, wider audience, it doesn't always work out. In fact, it rarely ever does. One example of this is DC DC's New 52. As you know, DC Comics is no stranger to resetting or rubber banding their continuity and publishing new #1 issues as a result. The thing that made New 52 different though is this was the first time it was a whole new universe, heck, a whole new multiverse. Even the transition to pre and post Crisis had some continuity between the two, but New 52 would be starting everything from square one once more. On paper, redoing the origins a few times to reestablish a few characters and stories so the fans don't have to worry about so much continuity is a good idea. The issue is though that the direction was so bleak and dark and edgy that you'd think someone pushed DC Comics through a hot topic with a blindfold. The new characterizations alienated the existing fans, and the new readers were wondering why Superman was wearing armor and dating Wonder Woman when that was nothing like the Superman they envisioned in their mind from pop cultural osmosis. This would also lead to the creation of the DCEU film universe directed by Zack Snyder, which requires me to cue this music.
It's raining stuff! Yeah! Hallelujah! It's raining things! And it's all wet out here! It's wet out here! Rough and tough, it's wet outside! It's raining things! Oh!
You gotta change the words to this. Wow. It's raining stuff.
Let yourself get absolutely, yeah! It's raining, oh! Woo! Ow! Ouch and ooh! Watch out, motherfuckers! Ooh! Fall for Jesus! He was a bad motherfucker! Woo! And he had to do what he had to do!
Nothing about men.
Rearrange the sky so that each and every brother can get out there and do woo! It's raining stuff! Oh! It's raining things! Watch out! Shit is flying around! The fuck was that? Some heavy shit flying around! Watch your shit! Watch your shit!
Holy shit.
Yeah, I'm never gonna let this closet homo get away with hiding. I know what you are, Zach. Anyway, the New 52 was eventually so much of a disaster they had to do yet another relaunch called DC Rebirth that sort of restored things to how they were status quo pre-Flashpoint, with a few changes from things the writers felt were good, like the new Green Lantern stories or Damian Wayne as Robin. But if they never used Flashpoint to reboot the universe to begin with, they wouldn't have needed Rebirth to fix everything. Flashpoint could have been its own self-contained storyline and nobody would have complained. Maybe with tie-ins to Doomsday Clock if that was still going to be set up. Now, while I've been focusing on the creators' focus on the fans, the casuals did have some sense of entitlement. The Snyderverse fanbase is proof of this, considering how they poo-poo any DC movie adaptation that comes close to the source material and isn't in line with the gritty New 52 style vision of their closeted director idol. There were also a number of new Star Wars fans who latched on purely for the activism aspects rather than for a love of the franchise. Many within those two groups aren't even fans of DC or Star Wars or actually detest those properties. Which brings us to Tier 0, the anti-fans. People who detest the thing that people are a fan of. And for Snyderverse fans and sequel defenders, you will find no two groups who hate DC Comics or Star Wars more. A lot of the time, these people are self-evident. John Della Rose is a great example, and a lot of the time franchise creatives don't listen to these people or outright mock them. Daniel Vavra being an excellent example in how he outed John Della Rose as a wife-beating gay furry. But more often than not, anti-fans will try to hijack themselves into franchise fandoms they hate just to cause trouble. After all, in the age of social media, nobody has anything better to do than to be a massive douchebag online. There is also a problem of non-fans and anti-fans working their way into an industry. I spoke of Marvel's all All New, All Different before, but I'll go over it again. Around the same time DC was having its edgelord New 52 phase, Marvel was pushing a new wave of social justice aligned diverse heroes called All New, All Different. In this push, Marvel promoted a new age of heroes who were more diverse and resembled more a Burger King Kids commercial than an actual superhero team, and they did this completely cynically to promote social virtues to the new fans brought in by the MCU, which we're seeing the end results now, as now most of these characters have been integrated into the MCU very recently. The problem though is that these new characters were meant to be replacements for characters the fans enjoyed. Heck, Miles Morales only exists so that Brian Michael Bendis can watch Peter Parker get black-cucked by Obama, the sick degenerate that he is. Hey, did you guys know that that fetish has a very, very massive child grooming problem that makes Roblox look tame? Anyway, we're getting off topic. They pushed these new characters and stories that the old fans didn't like because they weren't the old heroes, and any criticism that the push received was called racist, sexist, homophobic, and so on, which made the fans feel isolated and alienated. And it didn't help that the new writers for these new characters hated the fans and the properties to begin with. It was basically like this comic. Yeah, good old The Thing, when the creator changes their product to appease people who never wanted it to begin with. That's the biggest problem with casual entitlement of all. The fact that it's being done to please people who never wanted to be pleased, only appeased. The thing about being part of a fandom or franchise is you kinda have to want to be a part of it, and you have to be interested in the thing the fandom is for. The reason that catering to people who aren't fans of a franchise or work is that it's neglecting to take care of the core audience for the hope of greater numbers. Casuals are great and all, but they're more often than not fair weather. Most people will only participate with fandoms or franchises on the surface level, and you know what? That's okay. Not everyone is required to participate in every group or hobby. If you don't like Dungeons & Dragons and you think the game is too difficult or you don't like the lore and setting, nobody is forcing you to play. However, that does not entitle you to come in and demand changes to appease what you want. It's a two-way street. You are just as free to not participate as the franchise is free not to cater to you. That's just life. And the fact that so many franchises like Pokemon, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Sonic, and others went out of their way to try to cater to these people just shows that they don't really care that much about the fans, only the money they generate. While catering just to hardcores alienates lower tier fans, casuals, and newcomers, catering to non-fans and anti-fans alienates pretty much everyone, which is why if you want something to succeed, you must never under any circumstances do this. Some people won't like your brand or franchise. You don't need to change it to cater to them. It's just like Bill Cosby has said, if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Which is why I'll reiterate what I said in the Enthusiast Entitlement video. It's all about finding a balance in catering to your true core fans, the people who financially support you without alienating anyone new. That way, you'll have a nice middle ground, and the unpleasables on both sides continue being angry, but will do very little harm to your franchise in the long run. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. This has been the Koopa Man. If you like this video, leave a like and comment as that helps my channel grow. If you want to see more, check out my other videos, particularly the one on Enthusiast Entitlement as it's a companion piece to this one. If you have other examples of casual entitlement or anti-fan catering ruining a franchise, talk about it in the comments as I'd love to hear more. Maybe I'll do a video on this topic again in the future. You never know. And until next time, game on.